October 1963, 9:42 inches the evening. The Waldorf Astoria, Park Avenue, New York City. Three privileged heirs locked the wrong door and pulled the wrong girl inside. What followed was not fury or retaliation, but a cold and calculated response built to dismantle an entire social structure without leaving a single witness behind. Everyone already knows how that night concluded. But how exactly did Bumpy Johnson turn one hotel bathroom into a permanent lesson that nobody could ever forget? To truly understand that outcome, we need to travel back to the precise moment the door first swung shut. The Waldorf Astoria rises on Park Avenue like a cathedral constructed to worship wealth. Tonight, the grand ballroom blazes under chandeliers dripping crystal above tables where a single-place setting costs more than a Harlem family brings home in 6 months. The air hangs heavy with cigar smoke and the unmistakable stench of power, that particular odor of men who have never once had to ask anyone for anything. This is the Liberty Gala, and liberty here refers to the freedom to purchase senators the way you purchase groceries, to draft legislation in private boardrooms long before it ever reaches the floor of Congress. Senator Harold Whitmore moves through the crowd like a priest making his rounds, taking informal confessions, shaking hands that have signed foreclosure notices and eviction orders, accepting envelopes thick with contributions that never appear in any campaign finance report. At the bar, Supreme Court justices swirl scotch that predates prohibition. Steel magnates huddle with politicians whose votes they have purchased so many times the transactions no longer require any real discussion. A railroad baron delivers a joke about sharecroppers, and the laughter that follows sounds like coins being counted in a back room. 3 months ago, he was talking about antitrust legislation, Judge Blackwell says, nodding toward a young congressman. Now he cannot even recall what the word means. Cost $75,000 to his campaign. Another $25,000 to his mistress when she threatened to go to the newspapers. This is the machinery that actually operates America, the real government seated behind the visible one. These men have toppled foreign governments and crushed entire industries while maintaining the fiction that democracy still carries meaning. Senator Whitmore represents Connecticut, old money so old that even the family has forgotten where it first came from. When coal miners walked off the job in Pennsylvania, he called them communists from the Senate floor. When Negro veterans came home and asked for the GI Bill benefits they had been promised, he called it uppityness. His Senate record reads like a formal declaration of war against anyone who earns wages instead of simply collecting them. Among all this wealth and whiteness, the invitation extended to Ellsworth Raymond Johnson is not hospitality. It is a reminder. The kind that powerful men deliver when they want you to fully appreciate the distance between their world and yours. The streets call him Bumpy, though saying it directly to his face will get your teeth relocated across the floor. The FBI calls him Public Enemy. J. Edgar Hoover himself has drafted memos about the threat Johnson represents, which is particularly rich considering what Hoover gets up to in hotel rooms when he believes no one is paying attention. To these men lifting champagne glasses, Bumpy represents everything their world was architecturally designed to keep locked outside. He is Harlem given physical form, the underground economy made human. Heroin flows through his distribution network the way water moves through aqueducts. Numbers rackets operate with a precision that would reduce any actuary to tears. Protection money changes hands in volumes that dwarf many legitimate enterprises. Johnson is a cancer, Hoover wrote in a memo that eventually found its way to every major newspaper. He corrupts, he destroys, and must be excised before the infection spreads. What Hoover conveniently omits is that Bumpy learned every single technique by watching these same men operate. Market manipulation, strategic bribery, violence delegated through carefully arranged layers of deniability. These are methods perfected inside boardrooms and refined at Harvard. The only meaningful difference is geography and the color of a man's skin. When Rockefeller dismantled competitors, they called it commerce. When Johnson does the same thing above 110th Street, they call it crime. The Cadillac Fleetwood glides to the entrance at 8:45, black as a grave and twice as quiet. Armor plating concealed beneath elegant curves, glass thick enough to stop rifle rounds but clear as fresh tears. The doorman recognizes the vehicle before the engine dies, his hand reaching for the handle with that particular nervous energy that comes from knowing who actually pays his real salary. Bumpy emerges first, unfolding from the back seat like a blade leaving its sheath. His bespoke tuxedo moves with him the way a second skin moves. The bow tie sits as level as a gunshot. The Patek Philippe on his wrist is the kind of timepiece that outlives the men who wear it. But no amount of money washes away what he carries underneath all of it. His shoulders hold the weight of too many fights. His knuckles are scarred from breaking jaws during the years before he could afford to pay other men to break them for him. A knife scar traces along his jawline, a faded silver souvenir from a Turkish bathhouse ambush in 1938 that left 3 men bleeding out across the tile floor. Then Elise steps out, and everything shifts. She is 19 years old, a Howard University sophomore studying literature, as if the world can be fully understood through books rather than through violence. Her cream silk dress is modest, but elegant in ways that the society daughters in that ballroom will never quite manage. Pearl earrings catch the light. "You look like your mother did," Bumpy says quietly, offering her his arm. "Mama said you would say that? Your mother is always right. That is why I married her, and why I listen when she tells me things I would rather not hear." Inside, the lobby burns with light designed not to illuminate but to expose. Elise's heels click against marble, echoing off walls that have absorbed a century's worth of whispered arrangements and quiet threats. "Papa, why are we here? These people hate us. These people hate what I represent. That is not the same thing as hating me personally, though in practice the distinction makes very little difference. That is not an answer. The answer is that sometimes you must walk into rooms where you are not wanted, simply to remind people that you cannot be kept out. That is how power actually works. Not by staying where you are comfortable, but by standing exactly where they wish you would not. And if they try to make us leave, they will discover that wishing and achieving are separated by a distance that not even their money can bridge. Table 17 is positioned far enough from the senator's table to make the slight unmistakable. Bumpy pulls out Elise's chair himself, a gesture that draws sneers from men who pay servants to perform such tasks. The banker's wife attempts conversation the way one might attempt to defuse an explosive device. Howard University. How progressive. My daughters both attended Vassar, but I am sure Howard provides a perfectly adequate education for certain students. Adequate is generous, Elise replies with a sweet smile. We are actually encouraged to think for ourselves rather than memorize which fork belongs beside which plate. Some might consider that excessive. Dinner advances through courses timed with the precision of military operations. Bumpy plays his assigned role, delivering appropriate responses, laughing at jokes that are aimed directly at him, pretending not to notice when conversations stop as he approaches. Elise watches him endure all of it with something close to heartbreak, because she understands what it costs him to swallow that kind of disrespect without reaching for someone's jaw. At 9:30, a man in a dark suit materializes at their table. The senator's chief of staff requests a word. "Mr. Johnson, a private room. 5 minutes." This is the real reason Bumpy was invited. Someone wants something. He looks at Elise, running calculations with 30 years of accumulated experience. Stay at this table. Do not drink the wine. Do not leave this seat. Do not engage in lengthy conversation with anyone. If someone makes you uncomfortable, catch my eye when I return. Understood? Yes, Papa. 5 minutes. No more. He follows the aide through the crowd, back straight, expression composed. He does not look back, because looking back suggests doubt, and doubt is a weakness that gets exploited until it becomes a grave. The door closes behind him with a sound like a vault being sealed, and Elise is alone with empty chairs and half-finished wine glasses catching the light like small pools of blood. 5 minutes begins to feel like a very long time when you are sitting alone in enemy territory. 5 minutes is exactly enough time for an empire to begin fracturing at its foundation, for decisions to be reached that cannot be reversed, for consequences to be set in motion that will leave wreckage in their path. The three of them watch Bumpy disappear like vultures observing a lion step away from its kill. They sit at table 9, close enough that they have been watching all evening. Their tuxedos cost more than most men earn across an entire year. Their family names appear on buildings, in history books, and none of that amounts to anything compared to what they are preparing to do. Bradley Ashford III sits with the posture his father's belt spent years teaching him. He is 24, Harvard Law, class of 1,948. His father occupies a seat on the Supreme Court, deciding which constitutional rights apply to which Americans. The Ashford money stretches back before the Revolution. Bradley has never truly heard the word no delivered with any real authority, never faced a consequence that his father's position could not quietly dissolve. "She does not belong here," Bradley says, his voice carrying that clipped prep school accent that sounds like privilege distilled into sound. "Look at her, sitting there as if she has every right." Carter Piton nods, ice clicking in his bourbon. His family owns Piton Steel, built half of Manhattan's skyline, and crushed 3 labor unions in the process. His grandfather accumulated the fortune importing Chinese workers for the railroads and running them until they collapsed. That blood money paid for Princeton, 5 country club memberships, and a rotation of European sports cars. He is 23 and has never worked a single day, unless you count managing a trust fund. Bumpy Johnson bringing his daughter here is an insult, Carter says. These people need to understand that there are spaces they cannot enter, lines they are not permitted to cross. Lance Carrington leans back with the easy confidence of someone whose uncle is the senior senator from Massachusetts. He is 25, Yale, class of 1,945. Spent the war years in Washington, coordinating supply chains from an office that never once heard gunfire. His smile is practiced emptiness, charm repurposed as a tool for acquiring whatever he wants. The father steps away, and the daughter sits alone. That seems like an oversight. Mistakes carry consequences, Bradley agrees. He looks at Elise again, and something moves behind his eyes that has nothing to do with politics and everything to do with a hunger that men of his particular class have always directed toward things they are not supposed to have. She is pretty. In that way, they sometimes are. They always believe they are better than they actually are, Carter adds. Coming to our schools, wearing our clothes, conducting themselves as though education changes what they remain underneath. Someone should teach her where she belongs. I agree, Lance says, his voice dropping to something quiet as a blade sliding between 2 ribs. Someone absolutely should. They have never genuinely heard no in their lives, not in any way that carried real weight. When Bradley demolished his father's Mercedes at 17, drunk and driving 90 miles per hour through a residential neighborhood, the judge dismissed the charges before they were ever formally filed. When Carter put a Dartmouth sophomore in the hospital during a hazing ritual, family lawyers made the entire matter dissolve with $50,000 and a signed non-disclosure agreement. When Lance was accused of forcing himself on a Senate office secretary, the woman found herself transferred to Alaska with a quiet warning that pressing the matter would have serious consequences for her entire family. They inhabit a world where rules are gentle suggestions that apply to other people, where laws are instruments their families use to manage the less fortunate. They have been raised from birth to believe that their desires carry more weight than other people's autonomy, that the world exists primarily to satisfy them. 5 minutes, Bradley says, checking his watch. Johnson will be occupied at least that long. 5 minutes is enough, Carter agrees. More than enough, Lance says, and his smile shifts into something different up close, something that looks like it ought to show teeth. They watch Elise the way wolves observe a deer that has wandered away from the herd. She sits alone, her posture composed despite her isolation, her expression steady, though she must surely sense that she is being observed. She touches nothing, drinks no wine, follows her father's instructions with the discipline of someone who understands that survival sometimes requires absolute obedience. Bradley sets down his champagne glass with a soft clink that sounds like a decision being finalized. She looks uncomfortable. Perhaps we should make her feel more welcome. That seems like the hospitable thing to do, Carter agrees, his grin showing teeth too white and too perfect. Our families did not build this country by being discourteous, Lance adds. They stand together and begin moving through the ballroom with the relaxed coordination of people who have hunted as a unit before. Not animals, but they have cornered women at parties before. Isolated targets at private clubs. Used collective presence to wear down individual resistance. Bradley arrives at table 17 first, his approach timed to coincide with a pause in the orchestra. Good evening. You are Elise, correct? I am Bradley Ashford. These are Carter Peton and Lance Carrington. Elise looks up, her eyes doing the kind of measuring that her father taught her. Good evening. You must find all of this rather tedious, Carter says, pulling out a chair without any invitation and sitting down. All these speeches, all this performance. I am managing. Are you? Lance asks, taking another chair, boxing her in from the other side. You look rather isolated. Your father really should not have left you sitting alone. Anything could happen. The threat settles between them, dressed as concern, poison poured into a wine glass. Elise hears it clearly, even though she cannot prove the intent. Her father spent years teaching her to recognize danger in whatever form it chose to wear. My father will return shortly. Shortly might be longer than you think, Bradley says, leaning closer, the bourbon smell arriving with him. Business negotiations take time, especially when a man like Johnson is trying to convince his betters to treat him seriously. It must be exhausting, all that pretending to be civilized. My father does not pretend anything. He is exactly what he appears to be. A criminal, Carter says, the word landing like an open hand across the face. A thug wearing expensive clothes, selling poison to his own community. But you already know that, don't you? I know precisely what my father is. The question is whether you know what you are. Bradley's smile freezes. Something ugly begins moving behind his eyes. Careful. You are not in Harlem right now. Here, your father's reputation means nothing at all. Here you are, simply another uppity-colored girl who forgot her place. The words hang in the air above the table like gun smoke. The ballroom continues around them, entirely indifferent to the violence being assembled in plain sight. Nobody notices three men surrounding a young woman, or if they notice, they choose not to care. Elise feels the walls closing, the trap being constructed with deliberate precision. She knows she should wait for her father, but something in Bradley's expression tells her that waiting might produce consequences she cannot walk away from. Excuse me, I need to visit the powder room. We will walk with you, Bradley says immediately, rising from his chair. We cannot have you getting lost. These hallways can be genuinely confusing. That is entirely unnecessary. We insist, Carter says, his hand closing around her elbow with pressure that looks like courtesy but feels like ownership. What kind of gentleman would we be, allowing you to wander alone? The hallway stretches long, decorated with artwork that costs more than buildings, carpet deep enough to swallow footsteps whole. Wall sconces provide light at measured intervals that leave stretches of shadow between them, pockets of darkness where things can happen without any witnesses. Elise walks faster. They keep pace without effort. Bradley on her right, Carter on her left, Lance trailing just behind, cutting off any thought of retreat. The formation is entirely deliberate, built to restrict and to frighten. You know what I find genuinely interesting, Lance says in a conversational tone, as if he is discussing something at a dinner party, is how certain people believe that money or education or fine clothing can alter fundamental realities. Your father might have wealth, he might dress well, he might receive invitations to gatherings like this one, but he remains exactly what he is, and so do you. What exactly am I? Elise asks, stopping and turning to face them directly. Out of place, Bradley says, stepping close enough that the bourbon smell becomes impossible to ignore. A mistake, something in need of correction. They have reached the women's restroom. Elise pushes the door open, thinking that inside there will be other women, witnesses, some form of safety. But when the door swings wide, the room is completely empty. Just marble and mirrors and expensive soap in a crystal dish. No one at the sinks. No feet visible beneath the stall doors. Only silence, and the sudden, shattering understanding that she has made a terrible error in judgment. She turns to go back, but Carter's hand is already pressed against the door, pushing it wider. Bradley is directly behind her, close enough that she can feel his breath on the back of her neck. Lance enters last and lets the door fall shut with a soft click that sounds like a cell door locking. The deadbolt slides home with the finality of a coffin lid being sealed. Now, Bradley says, all trace of charm gone, replaced by a hunger that has finally received permission to feed. Let us have a conversation about where you belong. The marble is cold through her palms as she steps backward against the sink. The mirrors return everything in triplicate, multiplying her isolation into infinity. Outside, the gala continues, orchestra music filtering through walls too substantial to carry screaming. Carter loosens his bow tie. Lance settles his back against the door, the only exit. Bradley smiles, and it is the kind of smile that belongs in old paintings of hell. When that door closes, Lance says quietly, their laws stop applying. The only law that matters in here is the one we make. Elise's hand moves toward her purse, reaching for the small knife her mother had quietly insisted she always carry. But before her fingers reach the clasp, Bradley's hand closes around her wrist with a grip firm enough to leave bruises. Lesson 1. In our world, you are nothing. Lesson 2 is going to hurt. The door of the last stall, the one nobody thought to check because it appeared empty, swings open with a soft creak. The sound cuts through the moment like a razor drawn across silk. All four of them freeze. All four heads turn toward the source, with the sudden animal awareness that the equation in this room has fundamentally changed. What emerges is not rescue. What emerges is something else entirely. The man wears a charcoal gray suit cut to allow free movement while concealing what needs to remain concealed. His face is the kind that disappears in crowds, features assembled in a configuration that suggests a human being without suggesting much else beyond that. But his eyes are different. They are flat and hollow as windows looking into rooms where nothing lives. The eyes of a man who has watched other men die and registered nothing close to feeling, who has pulled triggers and walked away and gone home to sleep without any dreams at all. They call him Zip. He is Bumpy Johnson's insurance policy, the enforcement arm that moves in shadow, the reminder that empires rest on the willingness to kill when killing becomes the only remaining option. He does not speak immediately. His right hand rises from his jacket holding something small, dark, and purposeful. A pistol with a suppressor already threaded onto the barrel. He holds it with the casual competence of a man who has held pistols so many times the weapon has become an extension of his own hand. He points it at Bradley first, the barrel settling on the center of his chest where heart and lungs overlap, where a bullet delivers maximum damage with minimum wasted effort. Then he sweeps across to Carter, measuring distance and angle, then to Lance at the door, accounting for the possibility that he might attempt to run. The mathematics of potential killing worked out in the time it takes to draw one breath. Bradley's hand drops from Elise's wrist as though he has grabbed something scalding. He steps backward, placing distance between himself and the girl, between himself and the gun, between himself and accountability. He has spent 24 years being taught that consequences do not apply to people bearing his name. His face has gone the color of old paper. Carter stops moving entirely, freezes in place as if someone has taken a photograph. His hands have risen slightly, not quite a full surrender, but heading steadily in that direction, a gesture his body produces without consulting his mind, because his body understands that men holding guns require a completely different set of protocols. Lance removes his hand from the door frame, lets his arm fall slowly to his side, tries to make himself look smaller and less threatening, even though he remains the only thing standing between the door and freedom. His mouth opens as though he is about to say something, perhaps to explain himself, or negotiate, or threaten using the weight of his family name, but no sound comes out. "Gentlemen," Zip says, and his voice is soft as a pillow being pressed slowly over someone's face, as quiet as snowfall settling across fresh graves. "You have made what those of us in this particular line of work refer to as a terminal miscalculation, the variety that typically concludes with bodies being retrieved from the Hudson River approximately 6 weeks later after the fish have had adequate time to attend to them. The words settle in the air like smoke, like the smell of cordite after a weapon has been discharged. They are not precisely threats. They are delivered with the measured calm of a man describing meteorological patterns or solving equations on a chalkboard. You believed that the door closing meant you were protected," Zip continues, the pistol remaining perfectly level. "You believed that being alone with her meant you could do whatever pleased you without facing any consequence at all. You believed your money and your family names and your father's positions would insulate you from accountability. Each of those assumptions was incorrect." Bradley attempts to speak, his mouth working like something pulled suddenly from water. But before any sound forms, Zip makes a small, economical gesture with the barrel, and Bradley's mouth closes again. "In the world you come from," Zip says, "money means power, names provide protection. But you are no longer in that world. You walked through a door tonight, and now you are in mine. And in my world, the only currency with any real value is what you are willing to do when nobody is watching." Carter finally locates his voice, manages to force words past the fear that has been slowly strangling his throat. "Do you know who we are? Our families will bury you. They will erase you completely." Zip looks at him the way a scientist might examine a curious specimen under glass. "Your families will do absolutely nothing. Because if anything happens to any of you in this room tonight, if you leave this bathroom damaged or traumatized or dead, your families will not seek revenge. They will seek distance. They will deny any knowledge of you. They will sever you like infected tissue to prevent the contamination from reaching the parts they actually care about, which is not you personally, but the family name, the family reputation, the family legacy." He allows that to settle, watching each of their faces as reality begins to penetrate through the accumulated layers of privilege and inherited certainty. "You believe you matter to them. You do not. You are accessories to their social standing, props in their ongoing performance of dynasty and power. The moment you transform from assets into liabilities, they will discard you faster than you discarded any remaining sense of decency when you followed this girl down this hallway and into a locked room." The silence that follows is the sound of entire worlds collapsing, of certainties fracturing at their foundations, of young men who have never once been required to question their position in the universe, suddenly confronting the reality that their position is nowhere near as permanent or protected as they have always been told. In a locked room, Zip says, his voice barely above a whisper, "A title is just sound. Money is just paper. Your name is just a combination of syllables that nobody will remember after the screaming finishes. The only thing that matters in here is who holds the gun and who has the experience to use it." He shifts the pistol slightly, moving it from one face to the next, measuring each of them against some internal accounting, weighing what they represent against what they have just attempted. "So now we negotiate terms. Now we discuss the conditions of your continued existence, because Mr. Johnson is going to come through that door in approximately 2 minutes. And what he discovers when he arrives will determine whether you walk out of this building under your own power or whether you leave it in pieces that will require dental records for formal identification." The door opens and Bumpy fills the frame the way judgment fills a courtroom, arriving slightly ahead of schedule. His eyes go immediately to Elise, cataloging her from head to toe with the practiced speed of a man who has assessed damage his entire adult life. Her dress is intact. Her face is unmarked. Good. That means options remain available that would not have been available otherwise. He nods once, and Elise steps behind Zip, Only then does Bumpy turn his full attention to the three men pressed against the far wall. "Mr. Johnson," Bradley begins, his voice thin to almost nothing. "This is a misunderstanding. We were simply talking. No harm was intended." Bumpy removes his jacket slowly, folds it carefully, drapes it over the towel rack with the unhurried deliberateness of a man who understands that measured action communicates more than rushing ever could. He adjusts his cufflinks, rolls his sleeves up exactly 2 turns, exposing forearms that carry the scarring of knives and brass knuckles and broken bottles from decades of a life lived where the law was an irregular visitor at best. "Zip, what did you observe?" "They followed her from the ballroom, cornered her at the table, then accompanied her here against her expressed objection. Once inside, they secured the door." Bradley restrained her wrist with force. Carter positioned himself to block the exit. Lance verbalized clear intent to teach her a lesson about knowing her place. All three made statements indicating premeditated assault with explicit racial motivation. Bumpy nods, slow and deliberate. Disappointing. He produces a cigarette case from his breast pocket, removes one, lights it with a match struck directly against the marble surface, the sound small and sharp in the enclosed space. "Here is what happens next. I am going to present you with 3 choices." He takes a slow drag, exhales the smoke in a thin stream. "Choice 1, I allow Zip to shoot you. 3 rounds, center mass. Your bodies are moved to a facility in Red Hook. By morning, you have ceased to exist in any recoverable sense. Your families will search. They will find nothing. And eventually they will stop searching." He taps ash into the sink. "Choice 2. I place calls to your fathers right now and describe in precise detail what occurred in this room tonight. Then I observe what they choose to do in order to protect their reputations. And gentlemen, I assure you, what they do will be considerably worse than anything I would do. You will be edited out of family histories. Trust funds will be severed. You will be sent to the kinds of institutions where wealthy families store their embarrassments." He examines the cigarette, appears satisfied with its construction. "Choice 3, and this is the choice I am recommending you accept, is a demonstration of what happens when a man mistakes access for permission. Something that will follow you every single morning for the rest of your lives, reminding you that you are breathing only because my daughter asked me to allow it." Bumpy gestures toward someone waiting in the hallway. The bathroom attendant enters carrying a telephone trailing a long cord. She sets it on the marble counter and withdraws without a word. Bumpy lifts the receiver and dials from memory. "Justice Ashford, this is Bumpy Johnson. I apologize for the hour, but there is a matter involving your son Bradley that requires your immediate attention." Bradley's face goes the color of chalk. "No, sir. He is physically unharmed, but he has placed himself in a situation that carries the potential to become very public unless we can reach an understanding tonight. He and 2 companions followed my daughter into a locked restroom with intentions I am prepared to describe in full if you require it." The voice on the other end speaks at length. "I appreciate your circumstances, Justice Ashford, but your circumstances are these. You have a son who attempted sexual assault on a 19-year-old girl. My circumstances are that I have a daughter who was frightened in a locked room by your son. These 2 circumstances are not in any way equivalent." More conversation from the other end. Louder now. Suggestions about influence and consequences and the various levers that men in certain positions are accustomed to pulling. "You are correct that you carry considerable influence. You sit on the Supreme Court. You have the private telephone numbers of senators and governors. But Justice Ashford, not one syllable of that means anything to me in this particular moment. None of it reaches into this bathroom, because influence operates within the world of laws and institutions, and we are currently standing outside that world. We are standing inside mine." A long silence from the other end. "Here is what I am proposing. Bradley will no longer maintain any presence in New York society. You will arrange a position for him somewhere at a substantial distance from here. You will do this quietly, immediately, and permanently. In exchange, I will not be releasing tonight's details to the newspapers I own or to the journalists I employ. Your family name remains intact, and your son remains alive, which is a more generous arrangement than he has earned." Another pause. Then Bumpy nods once at whatever he hears. "I am gratified that we understand each other. Bradley will be waiting at the service entrance in 10 minutes. Good evening." He replaces the receiver, turns to Bradley. "Your father just exchanged you for his reputation. I want you to hold on to that knowledge. Remember it the next time you find yourself wondering why families like yours are not as loyal as families like mine. We protect our children. People like you protect your names. The children are negotiable. The names are not. On your knees," Bumpy says, and his voice carries no heat, no anger, just the flat, absolute certainty of someone issuing instructions that will be followed because the alternative is a bullet and a laundry truck bound for Red Hook. Bradley looks at his companions. At Carter, whose face has gone slack and empty. At Lance, still attempting to calculate whether his family name carries any weight at all in this particular room. But Zip moves the pistol slightly and the message requires no translation. Bradley's knees meet the marble with a sound like something inside him fracturing. Carter follows. Then Lance. All three kneeling on cold stone in expensive tuxedos that look absurd now, like costumes worn by children playing at being men. "You arrived here tonight believing you could take whatever you wanted," Bumpy says, moving slowly around them in a wide circle. "You believed your names gave you permission, your money gave you immunity. You were mistaken, and now you will pay a price that has nothing to do with money." He stops in front of Bradley. "My shoes collected dust walking through your world tonight. Clean them." Bradley's mouth opens and closes. His mind is searching frantically through years of expensive education for some protocol, some precedent, some page in some textbook that explains how to navigate this. But there is no page. There is no protocol for kneeling on marble in a locked bathroom with a suppressed pistol pressed toward the back of your skull. "I will not," Bradley says, his voice attempting authority but producing something closer to a child refusing bedtime. Zip takes one step forward and the suppressor makes contact with the back of Bradley's head, cold metal against warm skin. "You will," Bumpy says quietly, "or Zip will take the back of your head off. Your father traded you for his reputation 10 minutes ago. Nobody is coming through that door for you." Bradley's hands tremble as they reach for Bumpy's shoes, using the sleeve of his tuxedo jacket the way a servant uses a rag, wiping dust from Italian leather. With every stroke of his sleeve against that shoe, something inside him breaks a little further, and the pieces that fall away do not look like anything he will ever recover. Carter follows, then Lance. Both men cleaning shoes on their knees while Zip watches with the detached professional interest of a man reviewing ordinary paperwork. "Now apologize. Not to me, to my daughter. Look at her and tell her you are sorry for what you intended, for what you would have done if Zip had not been waiting in that stall." Bradley raises his eyes to Elise. His face is wet with something that might be tears, or might be sweat, or might be the visible dissolution of everything he was ever told he was. "I am sorry," he says, the words hollow as an empty room. "I am sorry for what we tried to do. I am sorry for believing we could. I am sorry for being what I am." Carter repeats it. Then Lance. Their voices carry the same emptiness, the same recognition that words are nowhere near adequate for this moment, but that words are the only thing they have left to offer. Elise looks at them kneeling on marble, looks at her father standing over them like a verdict delivered without appeal, looks at Zip still holding the gun with that same professional patience. She is 19 years old and has just been taught something about power that no classroom in any university could have prepared her to learn. "Papa," she says quietly, "that is enough. Let them go." Bumpy turns to look at his daughter. He studies what lives in her eyes. He understands that she is not requesting mercy on their behalf. She is asserting her own authority over the outcome. She is claiming her right to decide when justice has reached its natural conclusion. He nods slowly, accepting her decision, even though every instinct built over 30 years of surviving tells him that men who are shown mercy rarely learn from it. But this moment is not about what he needs. It is about what his daughter needs. "Stand up," Bumpy says, and the three men climb slowly back to their feet, legs unsteady from the adrenaline and the fear, and the sudden, devastating absence of all the certainty they have carried without question since the day they were born. "You are going to walk out of this bathroom. You are going to proceed directly to the service entrance, and you are going to carry with you the understanding that from this moment forward, your lives are different in ways you will feel every single day. You walked through a door tonight and discovered that the world does not function the way you were raised to believe it does. That discovery is permanent." He steps aside and opens a clear path to the door. Zip lowers the pistol but does not put it away. Bradley moves first, walking like a man who has aged 30 years inside a single hour. Carter follows. Then Lance, all three moving toward the door like prisoners being let out of cells, free to go, but not free from what they are carrying with them. They pass through the door, and it closes behind them with a soft click that sounds like the end of a chapter that none of them will ever be able to reread. They leave the Waldorf through entrances built for deliveries and service staff, through exits that people like them have never in their lives been required to use. And in that departure lives a kind of symbolic death, a crossing from the world they understood into some new territory where their names carry less weight, where their money purchases less comfort, where their fathers' positions provide less shelter than they have always been promised. Bradley Ashford boards a ship bound for London 3 days later. His father has arranged a banking position there with a clear and unspoken understanding that Bradley will not be returning to New York, possibly in any permanent sense. The family does not discuss what happened at the Waldorf. They simply remove him from the picture and allow life to continue without him. He writes letters that are never answered. Carter Patton remains in New York, but his world contracts measurably. Certain invitations stop arriving. When he enters rooms at his father's club, conversations change in ways that are impossible to miss. Eventually, his father sends him to oversee a steel facility in Ohio, far removed from the center of everything that matters. He learns to live at the margin of a world he was once promised he would inherit. Lance Carrington's political career ends before it ever truly begins. His uncle, the senator, explains quietly that public service demands a quality of character that Lance appears to lack. Lance accepts a position with his uncle's investment firm, a role with a title but no real responsibilities, and learns the particular texture of a ceiling, constructed not from his family's lack of means, but from a single night and its permanent residue. Zip returns to the shadows without ceremony. Nobody at the Waldorf recalls seeing him. The security footage suffers a malfunction that eliminates precisely 12 minutes of recorded material. Elise returns to Howard University. She begins writing essays about power and justice and accountability that find their way into journals where the right people read them. Something shifts in her after that night, a clarity that was always present but is now impossible to ignore. When wealthy families discuss Harlem afterward, they do it with a different quality of recognition, an awareness that Bumpy Johnson is not a man to be pushed or positioned or used as an object lesson for anyone. He begins receiving invitations to different rooms. He gets consulted on decisions that previously would never have included him. He gets treated with the regard you extend to the head of an organization generating revenue that most legitimate enterprises can only aspire to. Contracts get signed that would not have existed before that night. The invisible line separating two worlds becomes more permeable because 3 young men absorbed a lesson at considerable personal cost, and their families concluded that some lessons are expensive enough that changing your behavior is far preferable to learning them a second time. Nobody mentions the Waldorf incident by name, but everyone whose opinion carries any real weight knows that something happened, knows that threatening Bumpy Johnson's daughter carries a cost that their families have no appetite to pay. 10 years later, in a Harlem barber shop, a young man asks Bumpy the secret behind building the kind of power that actually endures. "Real power," Bumpy says, while the barber draws a straight razor carefully along his jaw, "is not about money or how many people are working for you. Those things are just the visible surface of power. Real power lives in what you do when the door is locked and nobody is watching. It lives in the choices you make at the exact moment when you could do absolutely anything and walk away without consequence. But you choose something else entirely because of who you have decided to be. The razor continues its careful work. The night I let those boys walk out of that bathroom instead of having Zip put bullets in them, that was the most powerful thing I have ever done in my life. Not because mercy is a noble quality in itself, but because I held absolute authority over whether they drew another breath, and I chose instead to let my daughter make that decision. That is what separates kings from tyrants. Kings understand when to use power and when to set it gently aside. He rises from the chair. When you reach the point where you can do whatever you want, to whoever you want, without anyone being able to stop you, that is precisely when you discover who you genuinely are. The challenge is acquiring that kind of power and remaining human enough to recognize when not to reach for it. This story is shared for historical reflection and personal insight, not to endorse violence or illegal conduct of any kind. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Stories like this one take weeks of research and careful writing to assemble properly. If this one stayed with you, if you found yourself thinking about the lesson Bumpy Johnson was teaching about accountability and wisdom over destruction, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Help us reach 1 million subscribers so we can keep bringing you stories that carry real weight. Stories about power exercised with wisdom. Stories about consequences faced honestly. Stories about people who chose to reshape systems rather than simply eliminate their enemies. The next video is coming soon. Until then, remember this. Real power is not measured by what you are capable of destroying. It is measured by what you choose to spare.